Fifth Wave Leadership presents Morrie Shechtman in his most requested presentation. The 8 skills needed to succeed in today's high-risk world. Skill number 1, understanding the new accountability.
And the first point I want to make is that accountability is not simply about getting people to do things and master tasks. It's fundamentally about creating relationships. There is no accountability outside of relationships. A really key point. Right? So accountability is not simply saying, did you do 3 things or not? And a lot of people misunderstand accountability as simply monitoring tasks. It is not about monitoring tasks. It is about establishing a relationship, a caring relationship, the result of which is productive work. That's the whole notion of accountability. So it isn't simply saying, did you do X, Y, and Z? Well, if you didn't do it, you're a bad boy, and if you did do it, you're a good boy. That's a very simplistic, erroneous notion of accountability. So key point here, there is no accountability outside of relationships. What email does, and we tend to talk about a lot of things in concern with email, what email does is put you face to face with your accountability or lack of such. And what it does is immediately put every relationship under a microscope. Right? And don't think this only happened professionally, it's happening personally too. So what we have with this whole notion of information is it fundamentally changes all relationships, the dynamics of all relationships, and brings conflict to the core, confrontation to the core. And if people don't have those skills, they're going to run and hide, and as they're running and hiding, you're going out of business. In its truest form, accountability is an act of caring. We tell our clients all the time, you understand that if you don't hold people accountable, you have fundamentally abandoned them. Accountability is the ultimate act of caring. It says, I care enough about you, I have enough invested in this relationship to go out of my way to confront you with what you're not doing because I believe you're better than you currently are. If I didn't believe that, I would essentially leave you alone. You understand that the opposite of love is not hate, it's apathy. There is love and apathy. Love and hate are both forms of investment in a relationship. One of the other things that information does is create a learning culture. Understand that we now live to learn. We don't live for any other reason, and what we're moving into is a day and an age where people are either learning or teaching almost all the time. And that's what information does to our life. So what we have is an environment now where people are constantly learning or constantly teaching, and that's the reason for getting up in the morning. We are now living in the first post-survival culture in the history of the species. That is, we have survival knocked for the majority of us. And if you don't have a business environment where people are learning, they will be leaving. Because if you're not meeting their needs to learn, they will be migratory. The problem we have with retention in business now worldwide is we don't have learning environments at work. We have task environments. And you know what studies of tasks show? You know how long it takes you to master a task and get really good at it? 18 months. After 18 months, if you're not learning, you are bored out of your skull. And we used to think you could do jobs for 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, 30 years. That is gone in a learning society.
Skill number 2, creating a conscious culture.
See, we have a mythology in leadership that you can motivate people. That's absolute nonsense. There is no motivation from the outside. Motivating people is like raising the dead. I leave that to deities. It does not happen for people. You do not motivate people. You essentially set boundaries and expectations that they either can conform to or not. The key point here, our time is about raising everything to a level of consciousness that has, to a great degree, stayed unconscious. You know what effective leaders do? They make every decision consciously available to everyone around them. And there is nothing that stays unacknowledged and hidden. You know what the good life is about? Raising all of your decisions to a conscious level and dealing with them on a level where you can take responsibility for those. Let me tell you what culture is very quickly. Culture is the articulation of values in everyday behavior. That's all it is. So when people say, how can you tell when you walk into an organization what their culture is? We just watch what people do for half an hour or an hour, and that'll tell us what the culture is. So culture, again, the articulation of the core values of an organization in everyday behavior is the culture.
Skill number 3, removing the firewall between personal and professional.
You know, the biggest change, one of the biggest change in our time is that there is no longer any differentiation between who you are personally and who you are professionally. One of the overt things we do in our work with our clients is say, we're going to bring down this firewall, and we're going to have you look at your people as one unified individual, personally and professionally. You are no different personally than you are professionally. That's a mythology that's been carried for a long time. And what information has done is remove the ability to compartmentalize. And if you try to compartmentalize, you will lead a very compromised life. So what information does is, and it does it in fairly simple ways, just look at what your cell phone has done to your life. What do cell phones do? Make you absolutely accessible all the time. You know, everybody's an emergency room doctor now. You know, we can call on you anytime. And it's done some interesting things. Among other things, it's made everybody feel like they're a crisis manager now. They have to be accessible all the time. And what it does is have you integrate your life and not be able to keep it separate anymore. So all this technology has come to a full integration of life and accessibility all the time. You're accessible at work all the time for personal issues. You're accessible in personal life for work issues. And now the onus on you is to just understand how to set limits, where to set the boundaries, okay, and how to reply to all these requests for your accessibility. That personal change always precedes professional change. One of the biggest mistakes you can make is to think that you can change people professionally without changing them personally. Let me reemphasize this. All personal change precedes professional change. You can train people to death, throw millions of dollars of resources at them professionally. You'll get nowhere if they don't change personally.
Skill number 4, hiring for life experience.
One of the reasons I got into this business from being a clinician was that I discovered that what people do in business is recreate the neurotic families they grew up with, so they feel at home every day. What successful people do intuitively is learn how to grieve the losses that accompany every stage of success. And don't underestimate the losses that come with success. You begin to leave people behind. Understand that. You know the difference between envy and pride? Envy is the feeling that people have who are not going where you're going. Pride is the feeling people have who are going there too. So what happens to successful people is they get surrounded by a lot of envy. What's this envy about? Well, it means a lot of people have declared very clearly they're not going there. And you know what? You've got to leave them behind. That's very, very difficult for people to do because they feel like, well, who's going to be left for me? The more successful you get, the more you narrow the catchment area for your relationships. Understand that. You don't broaden it, you narrow it. You have got to hire people in this economy for who they are. Because that will give you everything you need to work with. You have got to find out who they are. Don't pay a lot of attention to what they have done. Because very, very frankly, I don't know why they've done what they've done. You know, the biggest washout in business is people who look great on a resume and have done all these marvelous things. And they could have done all these marvelous things for wacko reasons. And I don't know that till I really get to know who they are. I am not impressed with people who have had high prestige jobs with high prestige companies. You know what our experience generally is? They've learned how to work that neurotic system very well. And they turn out to be very difficult people to deal with. So you've got to get to know who they are. How do I get to know who they are? How they lived their lives in the past is absolutely the best predictor of how they'll do their work. So how have they engaged in relationships in the past? What have they learned from those relationships? I want to hire people who learn from their experience. The worst thing possible is to hire people who have had the same experience in their lives 40 times over and have learned nothing from it whatsoever. And you need to find that out, and you need to ask questions that elucidate who they are.
Skill number 5, becoming the chief people developer.
If you're paying leaders now to manage tasks and manage information, you're overpaying them. That's not what they're there to do anymore. Technology can do that. Your leaders now have to be developers of people, or you're in trouble. So our business is doing that corporately, and then we do some unique things in terms of our work with leaders, CEOs, senior managers, in terms of their personal relationships.
Skill number 6, creating and managing conflict.
One thing information does is create a climate in which there will be more conflict. As information increases, conflict increases. And it's important for you to understand that, because one of the reasons that organizations are struggling now is that they are full of conflict avoiders. And if your people avoid conflict, you're going to be in serious trouble. The goal of leadership is on a daily basis to manage conflict. You understand that? If you have conflict avoidant people in any kind of leadership positions, you're in trouble. Because as information increases, conflict increases. This is a key, important thing to understand. We teach this all the time in sales. If salespeople are not generating conflict, they're not generating sales.
Skill number 7, moving beyond the tyranny of thinking.
Business people work real hard to justify and rationalize their gut instincts, or worse, override them. The most successful people we have worked with trust their gut. And you understand what instincts are. Instincts are as valid a database as a research project. They just have not been articulated yet. So I want to really emphasize that, because those of us who get a lot of education tend to look down on instinct. If you spend a lot of time around the university, it really gets drilled out of you. And if you have as much formal education as I have, it's amazing I have any left whatsoever at this point. Instinct is another database. It is no less valid than a research project done by a group of academics. What it has not yet been done is articulated and organized through the intellect. But the worst mistake you make in business is to override your instinct and then schlep up a research project that gets you to do some idiotic thing. If it doesn't feel right to you to do in business, why in the world would you do it? And we work all the time to help to say to people, you better trust your instinct. It is based on data. You have yet to organize that data, but it is there. It is not coming out of nowhere, not coming from Mars. It's coming from your experience of something in the environment that says this is not the right thing to do. I always use Disney World in Paris as an example of that kind of thing. And I can imagine a group of people sitting around the table saying, essentially, let's see, we're going to play something about America and fun in France. Gee, yeah, that makes perfect sense. Right. The French love America and love fun. Right? And my labs could have told them what a moronic decision that was. And then they get all these experts to talk about rail traffic into Paris and all this other stuff, and lose their butt for years, in the least fun place in the world.
Skill number 8, continually redefining your role.
You need to learn how to build these relationships quickly and deeply. You know how you do that? By risking early and giving people critical feedback immediately. That's what we tell people all the time. The only way to build relationships quickly in our culture is take a risk. What's a risk early? Challenge as early as possible in a relationship a prevailing point of view that someone has. If you don't do that in our culture, you have no value added. An information-intensive culture is not about agreement. It is about challenge. The only value added now that professionals bring to a setting is to introduce new ideas and challenge prevailing ones. If they don't do that, they aren't worth a penny to anybody, because everything else can be done by technology.
Morrie Shechtman is a renowned psychotherapist, college professor, advisor to political leaders. Best-selling author, frequently interviewed by top media sources such as HR Executive, Knight Ridder Newspaper Syndicate, Fox Television, and National Public Radio. CEO advisor. Entrepreneur. He is a brilliant thought leader, a top-rated speaker. Morrie Shechtman is a highly sought-after speaker who has lectured on personal transformation throughout the world. To schedule a speaking engagement with Morrie Shechtman, contact Celia Rocks of Rocks to Heart Public Relations at 412-784-8811.